So let's take stock a bit there of what Henry's done, what move he's made on the chessboard in the 100 Years' War. He's sent an embassy to Paris to the extremely weak French monarchy, who are in a state of civil war, effectively, very, very low ebb. He sent an embassy to them saying, we want nearly everything. He's asked them, or he hasn't really asked, he's kind of demanded a crazy amount of things. The Treaty of Brittany, which was already kind of crazy from the French point of view, something they can't really allow themselves to agree to, and then loads more things on top of that. So it's very, very aggressive, very, very belligerent. And he says, if you give me all these things, then I won't claim to be the full King of France. I won't press my claim to be the full King of France and take the whole thing. It's like, he's saying, either give me loads and loads and loads, or I'm going to come in and take everything anyway. So that is very aggressive. I mean, it's so sort of over the top, really, that as Anne Curry said there, and lots of historians, nearly everyone that's ever looked at this, has said it's so over the top that the French would never agree to it. And so it gives you a casus belli then, doesn't it? A reason for war. You've said, look, I've asked, these are my demands. I've asked for X, Y, Z. You've refused. So now you've left me no choice but to go to war. It's really unfair, isn't it? It's bullying. But there you go. That is the move he decides to make. So it is warlike, isn't it? It's like he's starting a fight, right? If you want someone to throw the first punch, so you can say that they started the fight, you can do all sorts of things, can't you? You can sort of push them, spit on them, do various things short of throwing the first punch, of forcing the other person to. And then you can say, I was left no choice but to fight back. It's as old as time. Curry continues, quote, unsurprisingly, the French rejected his proposals, although they did offer a substantial dowry of 600,000 écus. But with his sweeping demands, Henry had boxed himself into a corner. Well, he'd boxed both sides into a corner, really, hadn't he? And risked losing face if he did not react to French rejections of his claims. I think he wanted to be, wanted to be boxed into a corner. That was the point of it, really. At the same time, he was aware of the possible advantage of attacking while the French were divided. Therefore, as soon as the failure of the great embassy was known, he summoned Parliament to meet on the 19th of November, 1414. The opening speech of the Chancellor, Henry Beaufort, announced the King's intention to make war on France, arguing that it was a suitable time to do so, and allusion to internal divisions in France. By the time the Commons came to discuss attacks to support Henry's projected war, enough fervour had been whipped up to persuade them to vote a double lay subsidy to be collected in February 1415 and February 1416, a generosity matched in the convocation of the clergy of the Canterbury province, which also agreed to levy a double tax on the clergy. End quote. So the people in the church seem up for it. There's this thing that we've talked about it before with the 100 Years' War. It ebbs and flows. Sometimes there's lots of action going on, and sometimes for years and years on end, there's none. And there hasn't been any for quite a long time. And in the English mind, they see it as sort of disgraceful, or rather they were sort of the good old glory days of Edward III and the Black Prince chevauching around France, making lots and lots of money, winning battles gloriously, smashing the French up. It seems like in the English mind, they wanted a return to that. They were disappointed by the fact that Richard and Henry IV, Bolingbroke, had not done these things. And if Henry V, the young, new, energetic, warlike, belligerent new king, seems to be making noises that he's up for it, taking it to the French once again, Edward III style, Black Prince style, then they're all for it. They're gung-ho. He didn't really need to ask twice. Curry goes on here saying, quote, a council of nobles and gentry held during or shortly after the Parliament expressed a willingness to give military service, but there was still some caution in their views. They urged that another embassy be sent to France, which was implemented in the new year. The envoys were empowered to put forward substantially lower demands of the Brittany lands only, and a dowry of 1 million écus, so a bit of horse trading going on. But the embassy was overtaken by events in France. On the 23rd of February 1415, the Burgundians and the Armagnac-controlled government agreed to patch up their differences again. The French deliberately insulted the English envoys by having them present their demands on the very day, 13th of March, that the faction made their public oaths of peace and reconciliation, and Charles VI ordered taxation to be levied to protect the kingdom against invasion. With the threat of an Anglo-Burgundian military offensive having receded, the French dismissed all the English demands, considering themselves strong enough to resist Henry both in diplomacy and in war. A complete miscalculation, and we shall see how all that plays out. An incident which had achieved legendary proportions because of its splendid portrayal in Shakespeare's Henry V is the Dauphin's, that's the heir to the French throne, the Dauphin, is the Dauphin's sending of a gift of tennis balls to Henry. That this happened is almost certainly true, and shows the view the French had of Henry as an unimpressive and unseasoned military leader. The problem is dating the gesture. According to Thomas Elham, while Henry was in Kenilworth for Lent, quote, the Dauphin Charles, son of the French king, wrote to him very jesting words and sent Paris balls with which he could play with his young men, as was his wont. That's the end of the Dauphin's words. Curry continues. The king's reply was that he would, quote, very shortly send London balls, which would bring down their houses, promising with his own hand to win the game and put the French to flight from the kingdom. Since Elham places the account immediately after mention of the death of Archbishop Arundel, which was the 19th of February, 1414, the year must be 1414, where Lent began on the 21st of February. Government records confirm the king was at Kenilworth between late February and mid-March 1414. John Stretch, a canon at Kenilworth Priory, gives a slightly different version. He has the French telling the English ambassadors in Paris that they would, quote, send to King Henry, because he was young, little balls to play with and soft pillows to sleep on to help him grow to manly strength, end quote. So very, very condescending and patronising there, if true. On hearing this, the king gave the same response as in Elham, adding, quote, if perchance they thought to lie abed with soft pillows, then I, perchance, before they wish, shall arouse them from their slumbers by hammering on their doors at dawn. This tone fits better with Henry's stance in 1415 than in 1414, and also with French confidence arising out of the reconciliation between the Burgundians and Armagnacs, at which the English ambassadors were present. A letter sent by Thierry Gerbaud to Paris noted that the English ambassadors were not at all happy. This does not cause me concern, but they have made it clear that they intended their plans to be fulfilled in France this summer. Whatever the date and form of the tennis ball incident, it reflects Henry's poor international reputation in the early stages of his reign. The French did not take him seriously. Even in 1415, a Frenchman reported the view that he was overweight and often ill, end quote. It's a great bit in the Shakespeare play, Henry the Boots. Warlike Harry is going to teach you a lesson, and no mistake. And Curry goes on. Now, war was Henry's only option, which in any case seems increasingly to be what he wanted personally. Yeah. Although the French sent a last-minute embassy to England in June, when Henry had moved to Winchester in preparation for departure, it was largely for show, to ensure that Henry was painted as the obvious aggressor, as well as to check on the effectiveness of Henry's mobilisation. So both sides quite eager to try and make out that the other side is the aggressor. To be fair, Henry is completely the aggressor. All his efforts to make it out that he's not have never really fooled historians. Henry responded to the French attempt to seize the moral high ground by having copies made of the offers of the Armagnac lords in 1412 for the restoration of the Brittany lands, which he sent to the Council of Constance and to its leading negotiator, Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of the Germans and subsequent emperor. Quote, that all Christendom might know what great acts of injustice the French in their duplicity have inflicted on him, and that, as it were reluctantly against his will, he was being compelled to raise his standards against rebels, end quote. As I say, not many people, even then, really believed it, and most serious historians. Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? He's picking a fight. He realises the French are at a low ebb, riven by internal strife, and that he can take advantage of it, or kind of feels that he needs to shore up his reign. He needs a victory, it feels like he needs a big military victory. Okay, and Carey continues here saying, quote, although Henry was able to raise men and money for his expedition, neither was easy. He wanted a 12-month campaign of conquest, but he did not have enough cash in hand to pay soldiers' wages expected in advance, even with taxation income and loans from the City of London and other English towns and individuals, as well as from Italian merchants, a group prominent in European credit mechanisms, families like the Medici. Before the indentures, which are contracts for service, for the campaign were struck on the 29th of April, the lords discussed the problem among themselves and told the king that he had to make a sufficient guarantee for payment beyond the first 3 months of service. The solution was to give captains items from the royal jewel collection as surety for the second 3 months, with an obligation for the crown to find funds to redeem such items by January 1417. So he's pawning the crown jewels or the royal jewel collection in order to pay for this. It's getting close to scraping the bottom of the barrel there. That's getting close to pulling out all the stops. You can tell he really wants this. He's prepared to gamble everything on this.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.